midnight, to this journey through one of the most disturbing cases in the history of Charleston, West Virginia, you are welcome. Before we start, I encourage you to share in the comments where you're watching from and the exact time of your listening. We are interested to learn the places and the times of day or night these documented accounts reach. 022, it was the year 1898. Following decades of industrial development in the Kanawha Valley, Charleston, West Virginia was experiencing growth like never before. The sleepy town had been transformed into a bustling hub of commerce by the coal and salt industries. Teeming with horse-drawn carriages, the streets of the capital city were filled with the newly wealthy, those who had made their fortunes from the state's abundant natural resources. 051, constant steamboat traffic was carried by the Kanawha River, which bisects the city, bringing goods and visitors from as far away as Pittsburgh and New Orleans. According to public records from the Charleston Historical Society, which are housed in the basement archives of the Kanawha County Public Library, this period marked the height of what locals called the salt aristocracy. 113, considerable wealth had been amassed by families through control of the salt wells along the Kanawha River. Elaborate mansions were built by these families along what is now Kanawha Boulevard, each attempting to outdo the others in grandeur and opulence. Standing prominently on the corner of Virginia Street and Kanawha Boulevard overlooking the river was the Victorian mansion of the Vandergriffs, one of these elite families. 140, completed in 1892, the house featured 3 stories of red brick with distinctive turrets and wraparound porches that were the envy of Charleston society. A formidable structure with darkened windows that seemed to watch passers-by with an almost sentient awareness is shown in photographs preserved in the West Virginia State Archives. 203, the Vandergriff family, according to tax records and census data, consisted of Augustus Vandergriff, a prominent coal investor who had diversified into salt production, his wife Eleanor, and their 3 children, twins Victoria and Vincent, aged 16, and young Thomas, aged 9. 224, although listed as a coal and salt magnate, Augustus's wealth had more mysterious origins, according to whispers among Charleston's elite. Vague references to old-world connections and unusual business dealings abroad are made in society columns of the Charleston Daily Mail from 1895. A gardener, a driver, a butler, and 3 maids were among the several household staff employed by the family. 250, found in a ledger book during the estate sale of 1901, employment records list the staff by name and wage. Sarah Blackwood, aged 22, who had come from the rural community of Clendenin about 30 miles northeast of Charleston along the Elk River, was among these maids. Without explanation, Sarah disappeared in October of 1898 when she had been employed by the family for approximately 7 months. 317, particularly notable is what was discovered 64 years later in 1962, when renovations to the old Vandergriff property revealed a hidden compartment beneath the kitchen floor containing what appeared to be Sarah's personal journal. Entries spanning from April through October of 1898 are contained in the journal, now preserved in the West Virginia State Archive Special Collections under Catalog Number WVMSS 01898BLKWD7. 351, dated October 17, the final entry was made 3 days before Sarah was reported missing by the Vandergriff family. A story far more disturbing than a simple case of a servant abandoning her position, a common occurrence in that era, is told in the weathered pages bound in faded leather with a simple brass clasp. Noted by Dr. Elizabeth Harrington, who authenticated the journal for the State Archives in 1963, the handwriting shows progressive deterioration over the 6 months of entries, suggesting increasing stress or trauma experienced by the writer. 426, the presence of both human blood and salt residue consistent with preservation techniques of the period was confirmed by chemical analysis of stains on the later pages. Innocuously enough, Sarah Blackwood's journal begins. Gratitude for securing employment with such a prestigious family is expressed in her first entries. April 3, 1898. 452, grander than any building I've ever entered is the Vandergriff mansion. The floors gleam with polish, and heavy gold frames cover the paintings on the walls. Pleased with my work seems Mrs. Vandergriff, though she is particular about the kitchen. She insists I never enter without her express permission when she is preparing the family's special teas and tonics. 518, protective of her family recipes brought from the old country, She is, say the other staff. A more sinister aspect would later be taken on by this seemingly innocent restriction. Described as diligent, observant, and of good moral character was Sarah in a letter of reference found among employment records at the Kanawha County Historical Society. 541, it was signed by Reverend Josiah Thornton of the Clendenin Methodist Episcopal Church. That Sarah had been orphaned at age 14 and raised by her maternal aunt was revealed in interviews conducted in 1964 with elderly residents of Clendenin. Quiet but kind, and always watching like she was trying to memorize everything around her, was how she was remembered. 606, that Augustus Vandergriff had recently expanded the kitchen, adding a peculiar extension that did not match the architectural style of the rest of the home is shown by tax records from 1897. The installation of unusually thick walls, a reinforced floor, and a ventilation system connecting to the main chimney were included in this renovation, according to building permits filed with the city. 633, under somewhat mysterious circumstances just 3 months after completing the project died the contractor who performed this work, a Mr. Jeremiah Holcomb. Heart failure is listed as the cause on his death certificate located in the Kanawha County Records Office, though he was only 41 years old and had no known health issues. That Holcomb had requested payment in full before the project's completion was a previously overlooked detail discovered during research in 1967. 705, unusual for construction contracts of the period. Changed somehow her husband had returned from the Vandergriff job, mentioned his widow in a 1947 interview for a local newspaper story about historic homes, and that he had burned his work clothes and tools in their backyard fire pit the night after finishing the kitchen renovation. 726, signs of unease begin to show in Sarah's journal entries from May 1898. May 12, strange at night smells the kitchen, not like a normal kitchen should. Beneath the usual cooking scents is something acrid, almost like the tanning shed back home where they cured hides. 746, hours there after dinner mixing her concoctions spends Mrs. Vandergriff. Just her medicines for Mr. Vandergriff's condition, say the other maids, but I've noticed the entire family drinks these preparations at dinner. All except young Thomas, who refuses them and is often sent to bed without supper as punishment. May 23. Today I assisted Mrs. Vandergriff with carrying groceries to the kitchen pantry. 808, a new rug covering part of the floor that hadn't been there before I noticed. When I offered to straighten it, immediately she became agitated and ordered me out. Later, in hushed tones I overheard her speaking with the twins. Our secret must remain the space beneath, she said. Too observant is the girl. 828, that the Vandergriff family attended services regularly, though they never participated in communion, is shown by church attendance records from St. John's Episcopal Church on Quarrier Street. A curious notation beside the Vandergriff name, abstain from bread and wine dietary restriction, is contained in the parish register examined in 1965 by historian Dr. Robert Collins. 854, unusual for the period was this, as refusal to take communion was often viewed with suspicion. More detailed about the household dynamics become Sarah's entries by June. June 8, unless spoken to, never speak the twins. Like ghosts they move through the house, always watching. For nearly 10 minutes without blinking, today I caught Vincent staring at me from the stairwell. 9:17, when I asked if he needed anything, simply he turned and walked away. Delicate they are, says Mrs. Vandergriff, but there is nothing delicate about the way they watch the staff. Throughout the house their eyes follow us. Themselves cross the other maids when the twins pass by. June 15. 9:36, in me today confided young Thomas. Afraid of his brother and sister, he said. Not right they are, he whispered. Not since mother started giving them the special food. When I asked what he meant, over his shoulder he looked as if afraid of being overheard. Anymore they don't sleep, he said. Just watching me breathe. I've seen them standing in the hallway outside my room at night. 9:58, that Augustus Vandergriff had taken a leave of absence from his business dealings due to an unspecified illness is reported in a newspaper clipping from the Charleston Gazette dated June 12, 1898. This coincides with Sarah's observation that Mr. Vandergriff had begun to appear increasingly gaunt and was rarely seen outside his bedroom. 10:22, Mr. Vandergriff assures us his condition is temporary and under the excellent care of Mrs. Vandergriff, who has knowledge of traditional remedies passed down through her family, is quoted in the newspaper article from a business associate, Mr. Roland Woodward. June 20th, continues to decline does Mr. Vandergriff's health. Now visits daily Dr. Matthews. 10:46, arguing with Mrs. Vandergriff in the study I overheard him. He said something about unorthodox treatments and dangerous experimentation. That her family traditions were not to be questioned assured him Mrs. Vandergriff, and reminded him of his considerable debt to Mr. Vandergriff's business associates. Without examining Mr. Vandergriff the doctor left. 11:08, from the master bedroom that night I heard screaming. In the hallway was Mrs. Vandergriff when I went to investigate. Experiencing night terrors was Mr. Vandergriff, she told me, and that I should return to my quarters immediately. Sparse notes about his treatment of Augustus Vandergriff are contained in Dr. Matthews' medical records discovered during a courthouse renovation in 1966. 11:36, dated June 25, 1898, the final entry states simply, patient beyond conventional treatment. Family refusing hospital care. Symptoms consistent with systematic poisoning, though Mrs. V insists on family remedy. Have advised against continued home treatment without success. Removing myself from case. In 1904 died Dr. Matthews himself, but his grandson, interviewed in 1967, recalled his grandfather speaking of that dreadful Vandergriff businesses with evident distress even years later. 12:13, a growing tension in the household is detailed in July's entries. Over Charleston had settled the summer heat, making the kitchen unbearably hot. Despite this, notes Sarah, Mrs. Vandergriff kept the kitchen stove burning at all hours. July 15th. Oppressive is the heat, yet day and night Mrs. Vandergriff insists on keeping the kitchen fire stoked. 12:35, changed has the smell. No longer medicinal, but something far less pleasant, something almost familiar. Near the kitchen drain today I found a button from what appeared to be a child's coat. White went her face when I showed it to Mrs. Vandergriff. From my hand she snatched it and said I must have been mistaken about where I found it. 12:58, for the remainder of the week she then forbade me from cleaning the kitchen floor. July 22nd. Wrong is something with this house. In unnatural ways the walls seem to absorb sound. In the adjacent room today, while dusting the library, I overheard Mrs. Vandergriff instructing the twins. While still warm must be consumed the preparation, she said. 13:21, quickly dissipates the essence once extracted. Something I couldn't quite hear asked Victoria, to which Mrs. Vandergriff replied, the necessity refused to understand your father. In his own way now he contributes. Immediately ceased the conversation when I accidentally knocked over a book. On me through the wall I felt their eyes. 13:47, from public records during this period emerges a curious detail. 3 children from the surrounding neighborhood were reported missing that summer. That the cases were investigated separately and attributed to possible drownings in the Kanawha River, as was common during summer months when children would swim unsupervised, is shown by police reports discovered during a reorganization of the Charleston Police Department archives in 1965. 1406, never recovered were any bodies. As Michael Simmons, age 8, Elizabeth Doughty, age 10, and James Wilson, age 7, were identified the missing children. Within a half-mile radius of the Vandergriff mansion lived all 3. Perhaps more telling is that each disappearance occurred on a night preceding one of Mrs. Vandergriff's elaborate dinner parties, as documented in society pages of the Charleston Daily Mail. 1431, her growing suspicion and fear reveal Sarah's August entries. August 3rd. In me today confided young Thomas. Of the kitchen he said he's afraid. From beneath the floor at night he claims to hear scratching sounds. When I asked what he meant, he said, want to get out the children who don't go home. 1452, our conversation overheard Mrs. Vandergriff and immediately sent Thomas to his room. That Thomas had an overactive imagination she then informed me, and that I was not to indulge his fantasies. That servants who listen to children's stories often find themselves seeking new employment, she added. 1518, August 10th, real is the scratching. Myself I heard it tonight when I was collecting the dinner dishes. From beneath the kitchen floor a faint but persistent sound. When I mentioned it to cook, not to hear me she pretended, but her hands shook as she wiped them on her apron. Best not noticed are some things in this house, she whispered when Mrs. Vandergriff was out of earshot. Forget what you heard if you value your position, or your life. 1540 included this recollection an interview conducted in 1964 with Ida Mae Johnson, who had worked as a laundress for several prominent Charleston families. For long nobody wanted to work for the Vandergriffs. About strange sounds in that house there was talk among the colored staff. For 3 weeks in the summer of '98 worked there my cousin Esther. Without collecting her wages she left. Said she'd rather starve than spend another night under that roof. Coming up from beneath the kitchen floor one night she told me she'd seen Mrs. Vandergriff, her apron covered in something that wasn't food. 1624, entirely left Charleston. Esther after that, moved all the way to Cincinnati. Increasingly erratic becomes Sarah's handwriting in the journal by September. September 10th. What I saw I know. A smudge of something dark on Vincent's sleeve I noticed while serving breakfast. Dried blood it appeared to be upon closer inspection. 1647, to Mrs. Vandergriff I mentioned this, suggesting his shirt needed changing before the day's activities. That Vincent had been helping her in the kitchen she calmly responded. Family blood require family recipes, she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. For the greater good just a small contribution it is. Throughout breakfast watched me the twins, their eyes following every movement of my hands. 1712, beneath my uniform I've started wearing a small cross. September 15th. For 3 weeks now has not been seen Mr. Vandergriff. Convalescing in his bedroom, too weak for visitors, claims Mrs. Vandergriff. To the master bedroom today I was instructed to take clean linens. Empty was the room, the bed undisturbed. To Mrs. Vandergriff when I reported this, she said Mr. Vandergriff had been moved to the guest bedroom for better air circulation. 1734, that room too showed no signs of occupation. Yet at dinner, a place for him which remained untouched had Mrs. Vandergriff have me set. Whenever their father was mentioned, glances exchanged the twins. That the Vandergriff household had abruptly ceased ordering meat in July of that year is shown by a delivery record from Carson's butcher shop found in a collection of business ledgers donated to the West Virginia State Museum in 1963. 1810, dramatically increased, however, did their orders for unusual spices and preserving salts from Harmon's General Store. Unusual for household cooking were specific requests for items, according to a separate ledger from the same collection: saltpeter, alum, various exotic herbs, and large quantities of Kanawha Valley salt. Specially imported from Germany with airtight seals and decorative lids depicting scenes from Greek mythology, specifically the story of Kronos devouring his children, was an order for 6 porcelain preservation jars, more telling. 1846, September 22nd. Today I found the entrance while Mrs. Vandergriff was meeting with her mysterious visitor, the tall man in the black coat who comes monthly. The heavy rug in the pantry I managed to move. A small trap door, locked with a key Mrs. Vandergriff keeps on her person at all times, is beneath it. 1909, real is the scratching Thomas mentioned. Myself I heard it, faint but unmistakable. Beneath the kitchen is something or someone. To the floor when I pressed my ear, I could have sworn I heard a child's voice whispering, "Help me." Just as footsteps approached I replaced the rug. With a small wrapped package left the visitor. 1934, monthly payments to a Dr. J account. 4 special ingredients lists Mrs. Vandergriff's account book, which I glimpsed while dusting. That Eleanor Vandergriff received regular shipments from Eastern Europe, specifically from a region in the Carpathian Mountains, is shown by records from the Charleston Customs Office examined in 1967. 1956, always listed vaguely as household items or cultural artifacts were the contents. A notation in his private ledger, discovered among his effects after his death in 1923, made the customs agent who processed these shipments, a Mr. Frederick Danner, that one such package emitted a most unusual and disagreeable odor, not unlike that of a medical specimen preserved in alcohol. 2021, increasingly desperate become October's entries. October 5th. My wages I've started saving. At month's end I plan to leave and take Thomas with me. Terribly wrong is something in this house. For weeks hasn't been seen Mr. Vandergriff. Recovering in the country, claims Mrs. Vandergriff, but untouched remain his personal items, and his clothes still hang in his wardrobe. 2044, constantly now watch me the twins as if they know what I'm planning. From room to room their eyes follow me. At night I've taken to barricading my door. October 8th. To her brother in the garden today I overheard Victoria speaking. Another soon we'll need, says mother, she said. Nearly depleted is the essence from the last one. 2103, nodded Vincent and replied, the maid suspects. I've seen her watching. Perhaps she could contribute. Directly at my window they both turned and stared, though I'm certain they couldn't see me behind the curtain. Dead now I'm convinced that Mr. Vandergriff is, or worse. Before they do something terrible to him, too, I must get Thomas away from here. 2135, another missing child, 11-year-old Clara Bennett, last seen walking home from school along Virginia Street, is mentioned in an article in the Charleston Gazette dated October 9, 1898. We have no reason to suspect foul play. Likely wandered to the riverbank and fell in with the recent rains. The girl, quite strong is the current, is quoted in the article from Police Chief William Montgomery. 2155, for information a small reward was offered, but no witnesses came forward. October 12, tonight I followed Mrs. Vandergriff. From the servant staircase I watched as she entered the kitchen with a large key after the household retired. The rug she removed, opened the trapdoor, and descended into the space below. 2216, unlike anything I've ever heard were the sounds that followed. Not quite human, not quite animal. An hour later when she emerged, dark was her apron stained and she was smiling. To the twins' room she carried a covered dish. Long past midnight I heard them dining. October 15th, terrified is Thomas. 2237, before dawn shaking he came to my room. At the foot of his bed all night had stood Victoria and Vincent watching him, he said. To join father they want me, he whispered. Ready I am, they say. My plan I've told him. Together we will leave in 2 days when I receive my wages. To expect us I've written to my aunt in Clendenin. 2258, small amounts of her tonic each day has been forcing him to drink his mother, says Thomas. Dizzy and compliant it makes him. To pretend to drink it but spit it out when no one is watching I've told him. October 17th, 1898, reads the final entry in Sarah's journal. Any longer I can't wait. For tomorrow morning I've secured train tickets. At the station Thomas will meet me. To tell no one I've told him. 2317, of Mrs. Vandergriff's key in a bar of soap I managed to create an impression last night. What's beneath the kitchen floor I will know tomorrow, before I leave. Let it be known that Eleanor Vandergriff is not what she appears to be if anything happens to me. The missing children, Mr. Vandergriff's illness, the twins' strange behavior, to whatever she keeps locked away it's all connected. 2339, with my aunt in Clendenin as insurance I've left a copy of this journal. For what I might find God forgive me. On October 20th, 1898, was Sarah Blackwood reported missing. That Sarah had left without notice, taking with her several valuable silver items from the household, stated the official police report filed by Eleanor Vandergriff. 2400 hours 03, for her arrest a warrant was issued, but never was she found. A common thief was eventually labeled Sarah Blackwood, and the case was closed. Several inconsistencies were contained in the police report reviewed in 1965. In subsequent filings 3 times changed the inventory of allegedly stolen items. Only a silver letter opener was missing, initially claimed Mrs. Vandergriff. 2400 hours 28, to include silver candlesticks and a brooch expanded the list a week later. Several pieces of valuable jewelry and family heirlooms had grown the alleged theft by November. Suspicious he found Mrs. Vandergriff's escalating claims, noted Detective James Morrison, who handled the case, in his personal journal discovered among his effects in 1960, but was ordered by his superior to close the case without further investigation. 2400 hours 50, to a boarding school in Richmond, Virginia, was sent young Thomas Vandergriff the very next week, curiously. That Thomas be kept under strict supervision and not be allowed visitors or correspondence without her prior approval, requested the admissions letter signed by Eleanor Vandergriff, according to school registration documents discovered during a research project at the University of Virginia in 1967. 25:24, never did he return to Charleston, and at age 19 died from what his death certificate describes as wasting disease of unknown origin. A withdrawn student who rarely spoke to his classmates was Thomas, show school records from the Briarwood Academy for Boys. That the boy suffered from frequent nightmares and would often be found sleepwalking, trying to barricade his door with furniture, noted his dormitory supervisor, Mr. Harold Wilson, in quarterly reports. 25:57, unusual scarring on the boy's inner arms and torso consistent with small, precise incisions rather than typical childhood injuries is mentioned in a school physician's report dated 1904. Momentum in 1962 gained the investigation into what truly happened to Sarah Blackwood, when her journal was discovered during renovations to the building that had replaced the Vandergriff mansion. 26:21, not only the journal but also evidence of the hidden compartment Sarah had described reported finding the contractor, Harold Meeks, according to his statement to local authorities. Approximately 10 foot x 12 feet was the space beneath the kitchen, with walls lined with a peculiar clay mixture that had preserved the cold temperature of the room even decades after it had been sealed. 26:46, the strangest thing I've ever encountered in 30 years of construction, stated Meeks in his report to the Charleston Building Commission. No windows, no proper ventilation beyond a small flue connecting to the old chimney system had the room. Some kind of clay mixture that had hardened like concrete were the walls, not brick or wood. At least 20 degrees dropped the temperature when we opened that space. And the smell like nothing I've encountered before. Sweet but rotten at the same time. 27:08, several artifacts were discovered inside this chamber by workers: children's shoes, buttons, a collection of primitive surgical tools, and what appeared to be a stone altar in the center of the room. Made from the inside were the deep scratch marks on the interior of the trapdoor, most disturbing. Deep grooves in the wood, some containing fragments of what laboratory analysis later confirmed to be human fingernails, are shown in photographs taken by the police department. 27:30, that the clay mixture contained high concentrations of sodium chloride, salt, which had been used historically as a preservative, was revealed by forensic analysis conducted in 1963 by the newly established West Virginia State Crime Laboratory. Ample access to this resource was provided by the Charleston salt industry, which had boomed in the 19th century. 28:05, that trace amounts of human remains were embedded in the clay walls, suggesting the room had been used for purposes far more sinister than food storage, was more concerning. Specifically for the preservation of organic matter appears designed the composition of the wall material, wrote Dr. Lawrence Peterson, who led the forensic examination, in his official report. 28-26, with methods used for meat preservation in the pre-refrigeration era is consistent the salt concentration. Human hair, bone fragments, and tissue residue from multiple individuals we identified embedded within this matrix. To belong to pre-adolescent humans appear most, based on preliminary analysis of at least 7 distinct DNA profiles present. 28:54, abruptly in 1901 had left Charleston Eleanor Vandergriff and the twins, according to property records showing the sale of their home to another prominent family. Through an attorney was conducted the sale, but never appearing in person to sign the final documents were the Vandergriffs. 29:20, never was recorded their destination, and in West Virginia archives exist no further records of the Vandergriff family. Less than a year occupied the home the buyers, the Harrington family, before abandoning it, forfeiting their substantial down payment. Untenable is the house, wrote William Harrington in a letter to his brother discovered in family papers in 1966. 29:46, a full night has not slept Caroline since we moved in. Voices calling to them from beneath the floor claim to hear the children, who refuse to enter the kitchen. 6 hours went missing our youngest daughter, Mary, last week. In the pantry attempting to pry up the floorboards with a kitchen knife we found her. The hungry children told me to let them out, she said when asked why. 30:08, tomorrow we are leaving. Financial loss be damned. However, that a family matching the Vandergrift's description, a widow with adult twins, had appeared in New Orleans society circles around 1902 was uncovered by a researcher at Miskatonic University in 1965. Unique culinary traditions they reportedly brought with them, and hosted exclusive dinner parties for the elite of Louisiana society. 30:35, a Mrs. V and her striking children, whose soirees were coveted invitations among the city's upper crust, are mentioned in the social columns of the New Orleans Picayune from that period. Unexpectedly abandoned his position and disappeared Dr. Martin Chambers, the researcher, when he was preparing a comprehensive report on his findings. 30:57, never were recovered his research notes, and the university classified his unfinished work in 1968. That Chambers had received a package from New Orleans shortly before his disappearance, a small parcel containing what appeared to be a preserved human finger bone and a note that reportedly read, "Some appetites never die. Neither do we," told a colleague speaking on condition of anonymity to the Charleston Gazette. 31:23, in 1964 attempted to follow up on the Vandergrift case local Charleston historian Margaret Holloway. Descendants of the families who had reported missing children in the summer of 1898 she tracked down. That each family had received a substantial financial gift from an anonymous benefactor shortly after their children's disappearances she discovered, according to her notes now held in the West Virginia Historical Society archives. 31:54, within a year subsequently relocated from Charleston did each family. To Pittsburgh in early 1899 moved the Bennett family, whose daughter Clara disappeared in October 1898. A successful dry goods store using capital from an inheritance they opened, show city directories. To Cincinnati relocated the Simmons family, who lost young Michael, where property records show they purchased a home in an affluent neighborhood with cash. 32:22, under suddenly improved financial circumstances similarly left Charleston the Wilsons and Daughtys. By the Historical Society's Board of Directors was abruptly terminated Holloway's investigation when funding for her research was withdrawn. "I'm being watched," she wrote in a personal letter to a colleague dated November 1964. 32:45, told doesn't want this story someone. Deeper than I imagined run the connections between the Vandergrifts and the city's elite. Accidents were not the missing children. To something I don't yet understand, they were sacrifices. In a safe deposit box I've secured Sarah's journal. Make sure it sees the light of day if anything happens to me. 33:07, a reference to a conversation with Eliza Wilson, aged 86, in 1964, whose brother James had disappeared in 1898, was perhaps the most disturbing discovery in Holloway's notes. "Of James after he vanished never spoke my parents," said Wilson, according to Holloway's transcript. "The money they took and moved us away. But something they didn't know I remember." 33:30, to those twins, the Vandergrift children, talking I saw James the day before he disappeared. Something in a small box they were showing him. Magic it was, they told him. How it worked they would show him if he came to their house the next evening, they said. From school the next day never came home James. 33:52, in a house fire in December 1964 died Margaret Holloway. Faulty wiring as the cause cited the fire marshal's report, though unaffected were neighboring properties. In the blaze were reportedly destroyed her research notes, with only fragments surviving in various archives. That Holloway's body was found in her study, not in her bedroom where she would have been expected at the time of the fire, was the most troubling detail not included in official reports but mentioned by a firefighter in a 1967 interview with the Charleston Gazette. 34:29, as if she had been writing when she died were her hands positioned, according to the firefighter. Yet, nearby were found no paper or writing implements. In 1966 came the most unsettling development in the case, when excavation for a new building near the former Vandergrift property unearthed a mass grave containing the remains of at least 7 individuals. 34:51, to be between the ages of 6 and 12 are estimated most. To the late 1890s they dated, indicated analysis of the remains. That the bones had been meticulously cleaned of flesh before burial, with precise cut marks suggesting a methodical process, was more disturbing evidence. With skilled butchery rather than medical dissection are consistent the patterns of incision, noted Dr. William Harrison, the anthropologist who examined the remains, in his preliminary report. 35:23, to remove tissue likely at high temperatures been boiled show evidence of having the bones. That certain bones, particularly the skulls and long bones of the arms, show evidence of having been carefully opened to extract marrow are most troubling. Ritual rather than medical purpose this suggests. 35:44, by local authorities was quietly closed the case, who attributed the grave to an undocumented cholera outbreak. In an unmarked section of Spring Hill Cemetery were reinterred the remains. By court order in 1967 were sealed all records of the discovery, ostensibly to prevent public panic over possible health concerns from the century-old remains. 36:10, from the case was removed Dr. Harrison before completing his analysis. Unsuccessful were his subsequent attempts to publish his findings in academic journals. Wrong here is something very, he wrote in a letter to a colleague at the Smithsonian Institution dated August 1967. Suppressed has been my research. Restricted my lab access. 36:33, a visiting professorship in Australia I've been offered very generous terms. As far from Charleston as possible want me certain parties, I get the distinct impression. From a deathbed confession recorded by a nurse at Charleston Memorial Hospital in 1969 comes the most compelling theory about what happened to Sarah Blackwood. 36:53, one of the Vandergrift twins claimed to be the patient, identified only as VV in the nurse's personal diary. A family tradition dating back generations in the Old World involving the consumption of specific preparations to achieve extraordinary longevity described VV, according to the nurse's account. In his late 40s appears the patient, though claims to be much older, wrote the nurse, Emily Reynolds. 37:21, between aristocratic and something much older shifts an unusual accent with which he speaks. The recipe for eternal youth he called what he became agitated and insisted on telling me today, in a moment of clarity between morphine doses, VV reportedly said. Too much knew the girl. Risk exposure we couldn't, said mother. 37:42, our temple, our laboratory was the kitchen. Fresh ingredients required the preparations. The younger, the more potent. Participate refused father, so part of the preparation instead he became. Our workshop found the maid, so him she joined. Nothing should go to waste, always said mother. Reynolds's diary continues. 38:05, a process involving the extraction of essence from living subjects, preferably children, whose life force was supposedly stronger and purer, he described. While still warm consuming these essences he spoke of, claiming this was the secret to his family's longevity. In a way that made my blood run cold he smiled when I asked about Sarah Blackwood, Reynolds wrote. 38:29, particularly delicious she was, he said. A unique flavor gave her essence her curiosity. For special occasions we preserved part of her. The following day requested a transfer the nurse who recorded this confession, and shortly thereafter left Charleston. By a relative who had no knowledge of its contents was donated her diary to the West Virginia State Archives after her death in 1985. 38:58, from the hospital disappeared the patient identified as VV before formal identification could be established. That he was admitted for treatment of an unusual blood disorder that caused accelerated aging when he stopped receiving regular specialized nutrition show hospital records. Paradoxical cellular behavior exhibits subject, noted the attending physician, Dr. Samuel Mitchell, in the patient's chart. 39:23, of extreme age at the cellular level show evidence tissue samples, yet remarkable regenerative properties demonstrate when exposed to certain enzymes. About medical history evasive is patient, but family remedies that have maintained his health for longer than you would believe mentions. With current medical knowledge I cannot explain anomalies shows blood work. 39:47, in 1970 was demolished the Vandergrift mansion to make way for commercial development. Numerous equipment failures and unexplained accidents during the demolition process reported construction workers. Incidents that included power tools failing without explanation, workers experiencing sudden nausea or dizziness in certain areas of the site, and multiple instances of equipment being found rearranged overnight despite security measures included a log kept by the foreman, Joseph Delancey. 40:19, problematic proved the kitchen area in particular. Unevenly repeatedly cracked and settled concrete poured over the foundation. Into a parking lot, which remains to this day, was eventually paved over and converted that section of the property. Unusual phenomena, particularly in areas closest to where the kitchen once stood, have reported businesses that have occupied the commercial building constructed on the site. 40:45, cold spots, unexplained noises, and an overwhelming sense of being watched describe employees. A persistent cold spot near the southeast corner of the lot, regardless of the season or weather conditions, occasionally report visitors to the site. Faint scratching sounds when standing in that area at night claim to hear others. 41:07, unverified are these reports, of course, and likely the result of the location's grim reputation among those familiar with the case. In 1968 came the most recent development, when a woman claiming to be Sarah Blackwood's great-niece contacted the Charleston Historical Society. A weathered envelope that had been passed down through her family with instructions that it should only be opened if questions about Sarah's fate ever resurfaced she produced. 41:36, a single page, apparently torn from Sarah's journal, containing an entry not found in the recovered journal, was inside. "What Mrs. Vandergriff has been doing I know now," read the page. "A processing room is the chamber beneath the kitchen, not just a storage room. One purpose serve the children she takes, the ingredients she collects, the preservation and nourishment of the family." 42:01, the truth discovered Mr. Vandergriff and threatened exposure. Gone now he is, and in their mother's preparations his essence have been consuming the twins. His strength, his life force it grants them, they believe. A recipe passed down through generations requiring specific ingredients that only children can provide, spoke of Mrs. Vandergriff. 42:24, the sustenance she calls it. "After consuming these meals have I seen the twins change. Sharper grow their eyes, more luminous their skin. Than her known age appears decades younger Mrs. Vandergriff. Their actions drives whatever unholy science or belief, I cannot stand by. Tomorrow I will take Thomas and flee. Know that I did not abandon my post or steal from my employers if you are reading this and I have disappeared." 42:52, beneath the kitchen floor look. "For those who went missing look. For me look." As consistent with the writing in the recovered journal was authenticated this page by handwriting experts in 1969. That Sarah had indeed suspected the worst and had taken precautions to ensure the truth might eventually come to light its existence suggests. 43:14, during a recorded interview now preserved in the state archives, provided additional family history. The great-niece, Judith Blackwood. "No thief was her Aunt Sarah, always said my grandmother," she said. "Not right were the Vandergriffs and that what should not be eaten they ate. For years just the superstitious ramblings of an old woman I thought these were." 43:37, but that envelope locked away she kept. "To keep it safe made me promise me. About Sarah would ask questions someday someone," she said, "and when they did, known the truth should be I should make sure." Visibly uncomfortable became Judith when asked if her family had any other information about Sarah's fate. 44:02, a small locket that had belonged to her grandmother she produced after some hesitation. A tiny scrap of fabric was inside. "From Sarah's apron was this, claimed my grandmother," Judith said. "In the mail a month after Sarah disappeared arrived it," she said. "No note, no return address, just dark with something stained this scrap of cloth. As proof that something terrible had happened, kept it grandmother." 44:21, with servants' uniforms from the late 19th century was consistent the fabric, confirmed analysis in 1969. For human blood tested positive the stain, though degraded by time. Never been officially resolved has the case of Sarah Blackwood and the Vandergriff family. To horrors that Charleston society seemingly preferred to forget points the evidence, fragmented across decades and scattered through various archives. 44:51, a darkness that lurked beneath the veneer of Gilded Age prosperity in this West Virginia city suggest all the disappearances, the hidden chamber, the unusual family practices. The consistent pattern of interference whenever the investigation gained momentum. Note those who have studied the case. 45:11, from the convenient death of Margaret Holloway to the sealing of records about the mass grave, from the disappearance of Dr. Chambers to the demolition of the mansion itself, to keep the full truth buried seemed aligned forces. The fate of those who attempted to investigate the case over the years is perhaps most telling. 45:41, in addition to Holloway and Chambers, unusual setbacks or tragedies after showing interest in the Vandergrift story experienced at least 3 other researchers. From the program withdrew James Wilson, a graduate student at West Virginia University who began researching the case for his dissertation in 1966, after reportedly suffering from vivid nightmares and persistent feelings of being watched. 46:12, the story subsequently cancelled the newspaper. A stroke in 1965 suffered Dr. Robert Collins, who examined church records related to the Vandergrifts, that left him unable to speak or write. From his office during his hospitalization disappeared his notes on the case. No marker or memorial to indicate what may have transpired there in 1898 bears today the corner of Virginia Street and Kanawha Boulevard. 46:40, daily use sees the parking lot that covers the site of the Vandergrift kitchen. Unaware of what may still lie beneath the layers of concrete and asphalt are its patrons. In the West Virginia State Archives remains the Journal of Sarah Blackwood, accessible only by special permission and academic credentials. 47:11, that the final pages show signs of having been written in haste, with increasing pressure applied to the paper as if the writer sensed time was running out, report those who have viewed it. Not what is known, but what remains unexplained is perhaps the most chilling aspect of the case. Then the Vandergrift twins, who would have been in their 80s by the 1960s, appeared young enough that a hospital nurse recorded no suspicion about their age, if the confession attributed to VV is to be believed. 47:38, that whatever practices the family engaged in may have produced the effects they sought. This suggests. Of legacy is more troubling the question. Elsewhere did the Vandergrift traditions continue? The possibility that Eleanor Vandergrift and her twins may have simply relocated their activities rather than abandoned them suggests the brief appearance of a similar family in New Orleans, followed by Dr. Chambers's disappearance while investigating them. 48:01, scattered reports of missing children coinciding with the arrival of wealthy, reclusive families with unusual dietary practices contain records from various cities along the eastern seaboard and Gulf Coast between 1902 and 1950. A pattern that some researchers have attempted to connect to the Vandergrift case form these cases, individually dismissed as runaways or accidents. 48:25, due to missing records, uncooperative officials, or the unexpected withdrawal of researchers from their projects have invariably stalled, however, those investigations. In a Miami Society column from 1958 appears the last known reference to the Vandergrift name, mentioning an elegant dinner party hosted by the ageless Vandergrift siblings, recently returned from European travels. 48-49, their remarkable youthfulness and the exclusive nature of their gatherings where guests were served unique preparations based on old family recipes, noted the columnist. Citing factual inaccuracies was retracted that column in the following day's paper. Shortly thereafter left the newspaper the columnist who wrote the piece and reportedly relocated to South America. 49:17, beyond her journal no trace of Sarah Blackwood has ever been found. No record of her boarding a train exists. Matching her description was ever discovered no body. Shrouded in mystery remains her final fate, like so much of this case. That certain wealthy families in the city still possess Vandergrift recipes suggests a persistent rumor among longtime Charleston residents, though most dismiss this as urban legend. 49:48, yet occasionally, unsolved cases of missing children, and about old appetites and special ingredients resurface whispers. Nothing unusual may notice those who walk past the parking lot at Virginia Street and Kanawha Boulevard today, but some claim that on particularly quiet nights, especially in October, from beneath the pavement can still be heard the faint sound of scratching. 50:15, as if from a chamber that official Charleston history insists never existed, still trying to escape is something or someone. Beneath layers of concrete, bureaucracy, and collective denial remain sealed the kitchen secrets, it seems. That powerful interests have worked for generations to keep closed is a dark chapter in Charleston's history. 50:42, for the peace of mind of those who call the city home, perhaps, is where some secrets should remain. And yet, the truth, however fragmented, ensures survives the journal of a brave young maid named Sarah Blackwood. Across the decades echo her words, a testament to horrors witnessed and a warning unheeded. 51:07, some hungers cannot be satisfied, she wrote in her final known entry. With feeding only grow some appetites. If what I suspect is true, God help us all. A word of caution for those inclined to look deeper into this case. Close archives. Disappear records. Their work abandon researchers. 51:30, and sometimes the subjects of unwanted attention find themselves those who ask too many questions about the Vandergriff family and their special recipes. Continues the scratching beneath the pavement. Unsatisfied perhaps remains the hunger.